This letter comes from Sarah L. She says, I'm struggling as my kids will usually participate in lessons but never choose Montessori work otherwise.
So,
They play together or separately, they color, they look at books, they help me in the kitchen, etc. Those are all good things, by the way. But they never choose a work off the shelf. It especially feels like my 9-year-old is missing out by not doing more writing, reading, and math, etc. Help!
oh,
SOS. Sarah, this is such a great question. I'm so glad that you brought this up. We can talk about it more in office hours as well inside our
sure.
community. I'm going to try and make a note to, to bring that up because we'll have some time to go
In a
into
couple weeks when we do our
some
office hours.
details. Yeah.
But for now, I
But for
think,
now, here,
yeah, what would you do? Because I think a lot of folks can relate to this,
absolutely.
right? I mean, the
Um,
kids are doing actual practical work, real work. They're helping
yeah.
in the kitchen, they're reading books or looking at books, they're working together in different ways. I mean, these are all super good things. How big of a problem is it that they just never go to that shelf and pull the whatever, the
This
geometric
is
solids?
such a common problem for Montessori parents because I think it stems from the fact that we have that image of the Montessori classroom where children are just constantly choosing from work on the shelves,
Yeah.
and that is what's in their entirely contained environment. In fact, there is literally nothing else for them to do inside a Montessori classroom except choose from work on shelves. Like that is how the classroom is set up. So it can be very frustrating or disconcerting for Montessori parents at home when their children just completely ignore everything on the shelf and instead they play with everything except what's on the shelf.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially, if they've got a partner in crime, a
Uh-huh.
little or big
Yeah.
sister or
I
brother.
mean, in the house, usually our homes are so big, like even if we're living in a small place, like let's say you're in a 1-bedroom apartment, you've still got a kitchen and a bathroom and bedroom, one or more bedrooms. And there's just like probably your child has toys and other pretend play items, and they might just choose that. So there are actually a lot of questions we can ask to help you go deeper into this. But first, to say, like, number one, this is a very, very common problem that children aren't choosing the work that is on the shelf. There are some things that you can do to, one, help them to get more comfortable choosing things on the shelf. That has to do with your prepared environment. Now, she mentions that she has a 9-year-old.
Yes.
Okay, and so this is a critical thing. If your child is in elementary, this is a really easy thing to forget that in the elementary years, this is ages 6 through
12.
12, the full second plane, the children should be designing their own prepared environment. They should be choosing what goes on the shelf. They should be organizing the shelves. I know this sounds
It's
crazy.
counterintuitive to what we normally think of as how
The prepared
a
environment
classroom works or
works.
a prepared
Yeah.
environment works. Yeah.
Especially because we hammer it in so hard during those years that the children are not in charge of the prepared environment. That's your job as a guide. But in the elementary environment, it's the children's job.
Yeah.
And so if you're not regularly looking at the shelf and saying, hey, well, what up? You're never doing any of these things on the shelf. Like, let's make sure that this is how you want to organize the things that you need, because what's on a shelf should be the things that you use and that you need,
Yeah, I would
right?
add to that a couple of things. One is that to reiterate that idea of making sure that the shelf is reflective of what your child is passionate about learning.
Mhm.
And more than that, though, the second is when you talk about she's not doing enough writing or reading or math. I mean, I think a lot of us feel that guilt
Mhm.
when we don't see enough academic progress or academic focus. Sorry.
Right.
But remember, the lessons are not the purpose. The purpose is the understanding that comes as a result of working through the lessons. And if your child is acquiring mastery through other means,
Yes.
which is completely possible, the lessons are only one mechanism for doing that. And they're a good one.
Mhm.
And you can use them and they will give you results. But if your child at 9 years old is already fluent with reading, if their writing is
Mhm.
on level, so they're writing paragraphs, maybe short pager, one page documents, short stories. Look at the curriculum and kind of see what would be for a 9-year-old. They would be doing paragraph essay writing,
Journaling.
journaling. They'd be writing their own experiments. They'd be reading chapter books, short chapter
We're
books.
writing or dictating chapter books.
Yep, they would be
Mhm.
doing original art. They would be picking studies from the cultural section, which is the humankind and the
Mhm.
sciences and the arts, to study in depth. Maybe they pick a composer or a musician or an author or a scientist or a scientific subject or historical event that's fascinating to them, and they would research that, and they would go to the library and they pick books, or they go online and they download resources that can support and print those out, or however you want to structure your home with technology, and they're guiding that. And it may not be something you can check off
Mhm.
on our cards or any cards, because what you're really looking for is the outcome, not the journey.
Mhm.
The lessons are just the conduit, they're just the journey. So that's my reaction when I hear people talk about not doing enough writing and reading and math. It may
Mhm.
be that they've mastered it already. It could be
Yeah,
that they're
I
getting it in other
noticed the
ways.
way she wrote it was she says it especially feels like my 9-year-old is missing out. If it's a feeling and it's not something that you know, like, do you know that they're missing out, or are you just worried, right?
Yeah.
so,
So I'm gonna
so that matters. Are you digging out the cards
I was
to?
just going to look here. So, like, here's a level 6. This is
Hmm.
from our zoology.
Hmm.
These are zoology lessons under life science. What kinds of things do we want a level 6 child to do that you, so a 9-year-old would probably be around a level 6,
Hmm.
depending? They would examine the internal body parts of different types of creatures. Like this says internal parts of an amphibian, internal parts of a reptile, internal parts of a bird,
Hmm.
of a mammal. So, ask yourself or have your child work with you to ask uh, what do you know about the internal parts of a bird? Like what's inside a bird?
Hmm.
What's inside an amphibian? Do they have a
Yeah.
skeleton? Don't they have a
The
skeleton?
beauty of these cards is that with older children, they really can use these, a limited selection, to help guide their learning and
Yeah,
to give themselves accountability. And so that is, if you have a child who's at the older side of lower L or entering upper L, by that point, they could. I'm not going to say that they should be, right? Because there are some 9-year-olds who are less mature, but
sure.
many 9-year-olds are fully capable of evaluating their own learning progress. And so instead of saying, oh no, I feel like my child is missing out by not doing more writing, reading, and math, maybe you just take one of those to start. You say, hey, I feel like my child is missing out by not doing more writing. And then you start thinking, what are some ways that I can work with my child to incorporate more writing into our week?
Yeah, so
You know.
here's as an example, this is from our writing level 6.
Mhm.
Uh, Various kinds of writing that we would look for from a child at that level. Writing letters like to grandma,
Mhm.
writing multiple paragraphs like an essay,
Mhm.
making a graphic novel or a comic, writing historical fiction,
Yeah.
writing a drama, writing a genre story like a science fiction story. So let's say your 9-year-old is gets really excited about um, what's ballet. I don't know.
Mhm.
Let's make something up. So she's really, really, really got excited about ballet.
Mm.
Have her propose that she create a comic about dance moves, or the history of the Bolshoi, or a how the tutu was created, or have her write. So your work. This is a level 6 activity, creating a comic that's taking advantage of an interest she has.
Mhm.
And that's how thematic learning works. So by the time they're at that upper age, it's 9 is really kind of the end of the curriculum for us. We don't include upper elementary, but to be totally honest, the upper elementary program is not radically different. There are some other concepts, but primarily what you're going to be doing from ages 9 to 12 is giving your child more and more autonomy to dig deeper and more personalized
Mhm.
into topics.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think most important at this age is that you are working with your child to accomplish these goals together.
Yeah.
It's at this age, it's not your responsibility to ensure that your child is good at every single subject,
Yeah.
and isn't missing them. And I think that this is something that is contrary to the way we perceive learning and education in a traditional educational context, that we we assume culturally that the responsible party is the guide or the teacher.
Yeah, the parent that
And
takes
that
it on.
if your child is missing out on some reading skills or missing out on some, writing skills, or hasn't yet mastered this mathematical concept, whose fault is it? Is your fault, right? And if we shift our perspective, we can offload some of that responsibility to our children. And it's perfectly fine to do this, to sit down with them and say, hey, I've noticed you're not choosing works off of the shelf very often. Let's take a look at that shelf and take a look at some of these works. Are these not interesting to you? Or, why aren't you choosing these? And your
Yeah.
child might have some valid reasons why. They
Yeah.
might just say, oh, they're just not
They're
fun,
boring,
or they're
or
boring.
you might through the conversation learn that it's intimidating, that there's a
Yes,
right.
also.
So let's say you expect her to be able to do multiplication. It's not an that's reasonable if you're following the Montessori curriculum, that a level 6 child can do division and multiplication.
Yeah.
Maybe she's not confident in some predecessor math facts, and that's one reason she's not choosing it.
Yeah.
And through that
I
conversation, like the collaboration with her, you can discover that, and then you can help guide her back to those skills.
Yeah, I also think that it's really good with children who are of this age to give them an example of what, I don't want to always use this technique, but I think sometimes it can be effective with upper L children, or children who are moving into upper L, especially, for you to sit down and say, hey, a lot of people expect that a 9-year-old might be writing essays. Is that something that you know how to do already, or is it something that you would like to learn how to do? Let's help you get there.
Yeah.
What kind of ways can we practice more writing to help you improve your writing skills? And then work with them to develop a plan. Like, okay, like here are a bunch of different types of writing activities from the level 6 in our curriculum. Let's look at these cards. Let's talk about what kind of ways we can engage with this, as you mentioned before, different types of writing activities, and then develop a plan for your child. And you have that pencil out with the paper and you're taking notes. You're
Hmm.
like, improve writing skills, plan. And you underline it. I do this all the time with our
Hmm.
kids, even now, and it
Yeah.
really is helpful to have someone like taking notes as you're having a conversation. And you write down number 1, and you're like, well, what should our plan be to incorporate more writing in to make sure that your writing skills continue to improve? And your child might say, I don't know, maybe I could do my journal once a week. And inside you're thinking, I wish they were doing their journal every day. But you're not going to start there. You're going to be like, once a week. Great idea. What day of the week do you want this to be? And you start immediately giving your child limited
Yeah, this is a great
choices.
example of what we talked about in the beginning of the show, which is
Mhm.
freedom within limits,
Yeah.
right? I love this because the freedom is giving them choice, but you're guiding them, right? This
Yeah.
is what
You're
good
saying
teachers
it's
do.
important to work on math every week,
The best
right?
teachers, the magic of teaching is when you can have a child, your child, any child, the adult, whomever you're teaching, get to the aha moment and think they got there on their own. When they don't realize that you have been guiding them along the way, pure magic.
That's
It
right.
means so much. And that's really what you're trying to do at this age, right? It starts now and just continues on and on. You're going to work with the child, you're going to work with your child to help her kind of think through what she wants to do, and then you're going to nudge her in appropriate ways that are going to make her feel more and more confident. And she may never want to write all the time. It may just not be exciting to her, but it might. And when she gets into that habit, she might realize, like, I love writing and I just want to write every day, all the time. And that's what happened to me. I got into a period where when I was a teenager in high school, I wrote countless science fiction short stories. They're
Yeah,
all terrible, I'm sure, but
I know.
I just wrote like every night I would come home and I would type out my another short story. You just
Yeah.
love to write. It
I
just
wrote
felt
nothing
so
but
good.
fan fiction for
Yeah.
years and years. So, and our oldest, once he learned programming, wanted to do nothing but programming. And so it was important for us to say, hey, you also gotta have these other skills.
Yep.
Let's work together to make sure that they're happening. And how that is going to actually look in practice in your home is going to be totally unique to every single child. But it's really important that you start not by saying, they're not doing what's on the shelf, so what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Instead, you're thinking, great, time to make a plan with my kid.
Yeah. I want you to eat something. You're going to eat something healthy today. Let's plan the menu together.
Yeah.
All right. So, Pia asked a real good question. I know we're at time, but
Okay.
I just want to pop this in here. It says, what would a person do if they are aging out of the Child of the Redwoods curriculum at age 9?
Aww.
How do they do upper elementary and where? Um, that we get this question a lot. Like
We do
what
get
comes
this
after,
question a lot.
and we don't actually have a
Well, I will tell
because it
you
varies so much
I
from
will tell
family
you
to family.
the real method. Like there are Montessori sources out there that offer an upper L um, Montessori aligned curriculum resources. There are resources out there. You could go and search for them and see what resonates for you. Okay, totally can do that. But our personal approach with our own kids and where we were seeing our children naturally going into is specialization at that age. You know, the whole purpose and the curriculum that we have here, like much of it is designed for the full ages of 6 to 12. And we limit ourselves at 9, partly because
It's
we
our
just have,
expertise.
well, partly because we have just so much more curriculum. Like we just like this is a great age group, and we can continue to offer more resources within it. I'm whoop, not saying we'll never offer an upper L curriculum, like maybe in the future, but I would tell you that the most important thing that would be in that upper L curriculum would be continuing this collaborative journey with your
Yeah.
child. And to not be afraid to bring in multiple resources or multiple types of curriculum. That's what we actually did at these
Yeah.
ages.
We tried out
Maybe
all kinds of different things to see what worked.
yeah, so maybe you're going to take it. I really feel like at those ages, an eclectic approach starts to make a lot of sense.
Yep.
Like maybe your child, at those ages, we had our children taking a lot of classes. And so, like,
Yep.
they would participate in after school classes. I don't know if that's available in your area, Pia, but in San Francisco, our kids were able to take a lot of after school classes
To the
from
rec center.
the rec center, and
Yeah.
also other homeschoolers would collaborate together. Sometimes a parent would teach on a topic that they were
Mhm.
an expert in. Sometimes there were like maker spaces where there
Yep.
were co-ops.
Yep.
All kinds of possibilities exist. During that age, our oldest got to participate in a little micro school, and it was like a little family homeschool co-op. He did that
6 kids
2
or
or
something
3
like that.
days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were like 6 or 7 kids, and
Just
we
met
as
in the
parents,
house.
we actually hired 2 formerly homeschooled college students who were in between
They were just
their
out getting out of
they were just
college.
getting out of college and were about to go into grad school, but we were able to grab them for a year to teach our kids.
Yeah.
That
And we
happened to
just pulled
be
our resources together.
yeah, we
And
pulled our resources together, and it was wonderful for a very limited amount of time. But we also did like our kids took woodworking. We just like continued to give them ways to interact with other teachers in the
yeah.
world, which
Cooking
is
classes,
developmentally
theater.
important. Yeah. So at that age, like your children are expanding beyond you as teachers,
Yeah.
and you're trying to bring in other adults into your circle that they can learn from. And so our kids did a cooking class at a restaurant that was organized by a homeschool mom. Something you might want to
And
organize
Pia,
for yourself,
I know
right?
that you've been having a lot of success finding homeschoolers in your area.
Yes.
Not just homeschoolers, but Child of the Redwoods interested homeschoolers, and
Yep.
that actually would be my recommendation would be
Yes.
to start to leverage that to
Right.
whatever degree is possible
Right.
for you, and it just makes it more fun. And as I get older, when they're by the time your kid's 12, they're going to be in this shedding, academic shedding, and social. It's going to be all about the social and not about the academic. But from 9 to 12, there's going to be this voracious appetite to
Yeah.
learn. What they learn is going to vary. So just give them lots of practical experiences.
Yep.
Start to create those bonds so that by the time they
Field
get to that
trips,
12,
lots
they're
of field trips at that age.
yeah,
We
and by
took
the time they're
lots
at
of
the
field
12,
trips.
you're ready to start exploring the social piece
Yeah.
in a healthy way because
Yeah.
that's gonna what's gonna call to them. I mean, even that's why Maria said that kids in junior, what we would call junior high, should go to work on a farm. Like, it wasn't a time for academic learning
That's
anymore.
right.
It was a time for doing
But
and
this
being.
upper L age, that is the time for going out into the world as much as you can. And so, literally, what we did was number one, we really pinpointed our children's super specialized interests at the time. They were really emerging.
Hmm.
That with one of our children, we really had a child super interested in STEM. And so we enrolled him in a coder school and
Yep.
he attended coding tutoring. And then, like, programming became his great love. He started spending so much time programming his own
He just loves
stuff,
it.
right?
Yeah.
And that was also when we really opened up a lot of access to the internet. You know, so
Yep.
we were navigating like that type of
Our other
education.
child, however, is super into theater.
Right. And so we
And
started focusing on nurturing that. We enrolled him in improv classes, both in person and then during COVID online and then back in person again.
in
That's
local theater
remained. Mhm.
companies where he started to
Yeah.
learn. And actually, this we've got to run, but this actually goes back to kind of the letter and the sense of purposefulness. So learning to read, sight read, became really really important in a whole new and real and practical way
That's right.
when he entered the theater classes,
That's right.
and it gave this kind of drive and impetus to it
Right.
that was
A
very a
purpose.
purpose
That's
and
right.
a very natural purpose. In the same way that for our older one, he saw coding as this thing like what could he create?
Yeah.
He could create an app, he could create a website, he could create a program, he could make this thing do this, he could create a whatever, this animated thing. He had developed a purpose and then he had to go find the tools and learn, teach himself largely how to do those things. And that's what you're really trying to build. And that's
Yeah.
what it's all about, that 2 to 9, all the stuff that you're doing from 2 to 9 is about laying the groundwork
That's
to
right.
teach that independence, that fire, the desire, the self-discipline
Yeah.
that's necessary to then get hooked on something and know how to go after it.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, you're giving your children the whole universe from that 6 to 9 period. That is the whole second plane. And so, the principles that we teach in the lower elementary course and the whole thing about your elementary child, that stays for the ages 9 through 12. And then I recommend that you make your priority to keep creating new resources and
Yeah.
experiences for your children. I mean, now that I'm thinking back to it, there were so many things that we did. The ways that we collaborated with other homeschoolers to create learning experiences for our children were just myriad. I mean, it's like the cooking class, the micro school, just
All the science
lots.
classes, the woodworking, the
Yes, the forest
crafting, the forest
school that
school.
our
Yeah.
kids got enrolled in. We had regularly field trips with homeschoolers that were
Yeah.
planned to go out together and learn in different
And then for
environments.
the academics, finding specific
Yeah,
curriculum that we
and
like to cover, let's say the reading or math
my
or science.
personal approach to that was through literature
Yeah.
because by age 9, like, there's a lot of really fascinating chapter books that you start having deep, deep conversations about with your kid.
Yep.
And you can cover a wide variety of subject areas through literature,
Yeah.
just through those read alouds. And so that's our literal approach, full transparency, what we do with our kids. And if you continue to have questions about what happens after the age of 9 and you're in our community, please don't feel like just because we say our curriculum ends at 9 that, like, that's where the support stops. Please
No.
ask in our community. We've got members in there with children who are those ages, and we're always happy to help you troubleshoot and find resources.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
know we have several folks who have a child who's coming up to 9 and they're wondering through this. So
Yeah.
we love these questions.
Yes.
And